What's up, everyone? Prashant here on another episode of We Burn Blue. I swear we're trying to stick to a schedule, but life just seems to be getting in the way. What's even more ironic, Sharon, is we met in person and we couldn't even record, eh?
Yeah, I know. I think we were just exhausted having recorded 4 podcasts already. But no, don't worry, we have not reached the end of our rope just yet. And yeah, looking forward to today's pod.
Yeah, so obviously we haven't recorded for a couple of weeks, but we have been active over on Twitter where we dropped our predictions for United, Noah, and Arsenal, and then today's game versus Leicester, which we're recording right after. So if you aren't already, definitely follow us there and say hey. And if you like what you hear on this podcast, leave us a 5-star review and follow us on Spotify and share this with more Chelsea fans. But now that that's out of the way, what's on the agenda today, Sharon?
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned that we've been active on X recently talking about predictions, and we're actually recording this straight after the Leicester game. And we're now 12 games into the season, which is basically 1/3 of the season kind of done. And the Leicester game has just come straight after the what is the last international break of this calendar year. And the next international break is, I think, in early March, if I'm not wrong. So we figured it would be a great time to sit down and review, performances not only from the playing staff from the squad, but also Maresca's kind of management of the squad, and the tactics, for these last 12 league games, plus, the Carabao Cup run and the Conference League run. How does that sound?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's a great time to sort of review and take stock of how the performances have been so far and see what we've identified as potential issues and challenges and areas of improvement, and then see how that tracks come, the next set of international breaks. So I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this, which you've obviously been sharing with me on and off as the season's progressed. So how about we jump into this unit by unit?
Yeah, sounds good. So why don't we kick it off with I think we both agree that this is probably the most troubling area of the squad. Um, but naturally, also, you start with goalkeepers, right? What are you making of Sanchez and his performances over this first sort of 12 to 15 games?
For me, Sanchez has been a bit of a mixed bag. We can agree that he's made some good saves, so he can be a good shot stopper. But overall, I think his mistakes really, really tend to dominate the conversation, and he's made a bunch of those. Of course, Maresca has called it out, saying the system he plays and he wants the team to set up in is going to yield mistakes, and we can expect about 10 to 12 of these mistakes over the course of the season. And while I respect him for doing that, I don't know if Sanchez is the best choice for us to be in the number one spot. And obviously, Jorgensen's been playing in the sort of B team, and it's not that we've had more clean sheets. I mean, I'm not actually to see if Jorgensen has kept more clean sheets than Sanchez per 90 or whatever you want to, however you want to look at it. But I think it's only a matter of time before Sanchez is dropped and we see Jorgensen playing more regularly. Even today versus Leicester, we didn't keep the clean sheet. We looked all set for that. And I mean, granted, it's not his fault. It's the defensive unit in front of him that's conceded a penalty. But I don't see him as our long-term number one, and I definitely think that we will have to move on from him sooner rather than later. What are your thoughts on the goalkeeping unit?
I mean, I agree with that. I think the issue with Sanchez is, while he has the technical ability, like you say, to kind of stop shots, especially from long range, he's very good at getting across his goal. But I think in terms of his distribution, both in his decision making on when and where he plays a pass and how he does it, and also then executing on that decision, he fails on both counts for me. And what that does is, one really important aspect that this team needs to learn is game management, right? We've got a very young squad, as everybody is aware, and what that means is, when you're 1-0, 2-0 up, but maybe you're away from home and the other team is starting to put a little pressure on you, you need calm heads, mature heads to know, okay, maybe I don't need to try and play it out from the back each time I have a goal kick. Because what it does is it enables the other team to pressurize you in your own half very easily. So I think Sanchez is definitely lacking in that regard, and it allows other teams to build up pressure. And when we've seen it at home where our own fans get on our backs because we're struggling all of a sudden to play out from the back. He makes a couple of wrong decisions or he executes poorly on his distribution, and suddenly the whole mood and the dynamic of the match changes, and suddenly the opponents feel like they have an opportunity to attack us. So yeah, I really concur with you. I think Jorgensen actually it's time for him to get his shot in the first team. I really do think we've come to that stage because Sanchez is not going to be our long term number one. Um, it's interesting also, you mentioned how Maresca has approached it, and kind of backed Sanchez. But in a way, he's kind of saying the same thing about some of the mistakes that the defenders also make, right?
Yeah, I think he's sort of conceding the fact that when we set up in the system where we're trying to build out the back end, try to hit some long balls, there will be occasions where we misplace a pass and an opponent can catch us on the press, and it leads to these inadvertent mistakes. And I think we have been seeing that. You've seen Colwell as well, Colwell Fofana. I mean, they've been starting most of the Premier League games, and we've been seeing those mistakes happen from them as well. Where do you stand on the Colwell Fofana pairing, and do you think that's the right use of the centre backs in our system?
I think my concern is how Maresca is actually assessing, you know, the ability and the performance of his players. If he's then saying, well, look, my system is a very demanding one and it's very risky, uh, does that mean he's absolving them of all fault? That's the number one concern. I don't think that that's correct. That would be the correct thing to do. I do think the Fofana Cowell pairing is decent because it's pacey, but it lacks a certain, it lacks an imposing figure like a Disasi or a Tosin. I do back Disasi, in terms of his defensiveness. I just wonder, yeah, whether Fofana and Cole are both a bit too young and similar in the way they play. And Badia Shield, we saw him today against Leicester. He's always got an error in him. I mean, it seems like he just checks out half the time. So yeah, in terms of the system, of course, it's creating a lot of pressure on them. But I think you also need, like I said, calm heads, more mature players in that back line. I think that will make a huge difference.
Yeah, fair. To just on Badiashile, yes, he's been looking a bit off the pace, but the club just put out a tweet saying he had the most passes on the pitch today at 101, four interceptions, most on the pitch, and one block shot. So I think today he was probably one of his better days for him. In terms of the defense, another that I find a little bit odd in the system, which I can't wrap my head around, is the use of the fallback. So given how under Pochettino and as well for Spain, Cucurella was sort of inverting. I guess more for Spain than under Pochettino, Cucurella was sort of inverting into the midfield role. I expected that with the system we had with Gusto on the right, and Gusto is a good fullback, a good traditional fullback, playing and bombing down the wing and getting across. And I expected that we would see Cucurella inverting more with Gusto pushing up, and I think it seems to be the other way. So, in terms of that, in terms of the inverting and the use of the fullbacks, I'm not so sure if that's the best use of our system in terms of even the balance then with the midfield and the attack, the overlapping and underlapping runs with the wingers.
I mean, I've just been surprised at how little Cucurella has played over this first third of the season, considering his form. And I think he's basically said he's shown that he can be one of the best left backs in Europe. I'm surprised that he's not getting into our team. And Reece James playing a few games at left back was a bit of a weird one. I do think we're paying for that now with another, his hamstring injury has reoccurred. And Gusto playing on the same games as with James has meant that for Leicester we're without an actual natural right back. I do agree. Gusto is more of a right winger rather than an inverter, and I think the positions he takes up are really good when he is inverting. It's just he lacks on the ball, and I think Cucurella again has shown he can pretty much do it whether you want him to invert into the defense or midfield, or you want to play him on, like, let's say, left wing. Like today against Leicester, he played left wing most of the time, allowing Felix to kind of go a little bit narrower from the left wing position. I don't know if you clocked that, but I think actually having Cucurella down that left side was very effective today.
Yeah, I did see that, and I think it's also been possible by the fact that he has played Felix. Of course, Neto was out today, supposedly injured, and we saw another big one, another big change that I wasn't expecting, which was Enzo starting in the midfield. So that's been another point of discussion between us, right? Caicedo, Enzo, Lavia, what's the sort of best midfield that we should be playing? And obviously, I think Caicedo has been really, really immense in recent weeks. He's really living up to the price tag now, and he's even getting a couple of goals here and there, which are really great. But Lavia versus Enzo, Enzo seemed relegated to the B team, and of course today he started as a captain, got the goal. I mean, where do you stand on Lavia versus Enzo, and just generally the midfield, the way we've been setting up, and the way the system is played? Because I know, of course, we're going to deep dive into the tactics, but looking at the past 12 weeks, or the past 12 games rather in the Premier League, it's not 12 clear weeks, of course, but what, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Gusto inverting has meant we actually lose um, some impetus from deeper passing areas, and also in the advanced passing areas. Let's say if he swaps positions with Palmer, and he gets the ball higher up the pitch, and similarly in terms of shooting and crossing, if Gusto's crossing from the right wing where he's more naturally like able to do so and he's used to doing that, his crosses turn out to be better. But if he's crossing from much deeper areas where Palmer on the right half space is much better at delivering, right? It makes a huge difference to the chances you're creating. Similarly, he's not able to shoot as well as Madueke or Palmer, etc. So today I'm trying not to get too tactical about this, but today we saw Maresca start with essentially a 3-1-6, with Enzo finally starting from a deeper position, but he was playing in the right half space and he looked infinitely better compared to being in the left half space. And I from the start, I've been saying we need to get Enzo starting deeper and pair him up with Caicedo within this system, because Enzo can do both. He can hold next to Caicedo depending on the circumstances of the game, or you can push him up when you need the extra person in that advanced midfield area, and he can then play in the right-sided half space. He was making very, very effective runs down that right half space in the channel between defenders, and Madueke actually connected with him pretty well and pretty frequently today, and I think it was pretty effective. I think we've kind of nullified Enzo's strength by playing him in the left half space. But I think today we've kind of seen how he can be used. In the first half, we used that 3-1-6 that I mentioned. Second half, once we were starting to manage the game a bit more, and Leicester made their subs, Maresca switched to the 3-2-5 with Enzo sitting alongside Caicedo, and then Lavia came on for Caicedo. And again, he was effective there in picking up the ball from deep and just connecting defense to your advanced playmakers or playing runners in behind. So I do think we actually saw him in an effective position that got the best out of his abilities. Um, and like you say, now that means Lavia will probably spend some time out if we do continue like this. But at least it adds that extra bit of maturity, I think, on the pitch.
Yeah, and do you think that he was able to play Enzo in that position because he also had Felix on the pitch, opposed to a more natural wide player like, say, Pedro Neto or a Sancho? Do you think that's what enabled him to play Enzo deeper? And Is that something that we can then expect if you think Enzo's going to be playing deeper more often?
I think he was able to do that today. Absolutely right in the sense that yeah, Neto was injured. He didn't want to play Sancho because of the illness. I don't know why Mudryk wasn't given the shout, but I guess Felix kind of threw a tantrum last week and maybe got his way a bit. But it worked out. I mean, you could play the same way, but play Neto on the left wing or Mudryk on the left wing, and if Gusto was fit, he could play right wing and let Palmer just go to his usual right half space where he's always playing. You know, there are many ways to do it, right? So I wouldn't say it was necessarily because okay, Felix was playing instead of a winger. Maresca's shown that he's adapting. He can adapt to certain situations, and he's got different combinations. And it goes back to the versatility of the fullbacks, right? Because I think Reece James and Gusto can both play right wing. And, you know, Cucurella has shown today he can play left wing, but he can also invert. So I think it's more down to the versatility of the fullbacks rather than necessarily Neto being injured today. But the difference was today, having Felix on the pitch enabled us to have somebody who could actually, they have the close control, the agility, and the acceleration to turn within that left half space and carry the ball, which I don't think Enzo is as effective doing in the opponent's half. He's a good, he can turn with the ball in possession our half and kind of use his body and lay the ball on, but he's not a very effective ball carrier, which I think you saw Felix. He was really effective at doing that. And, I think this is when we're going to start seeing the half eights or half tens being more attacking. You'll see we're able to get more attacking players into these positions rather than trying to shoehorn Enzo in there.
Got it. Got it. That makes sense. So, having looked at the keepers, the defense, the mid, naturally we move on to the attack. And attack-wise, I think one of the biggest talking points for me, at least, one of the biggest highlights of the first trimester, as you would call it, is essentially Jackson's improvement. I mean, he's really, really stepped up, I think, from last season. It's almost like he took Mikel's comments personally and he just said, fuck it, pardon my French, I'm gonna just, take this charge. And there have been a lot of good moments from him. There have been moments where I think in the past he would have been selfish and forced a shot, and he's actually had the maturity to look up and pass. But today I think I was really impressed with the goal he scored because it was pure shithousery, in my opinion. Like, on the pitch, forcing the defender to make a mistake, getting your way to the ball, making sure that happens, and and then just poking it in. And I think that was a really good goal. In fact, one of the Chelsea groups I'm on, someone actually said that's very reminiscent of Costa, which is something I was like, yeah, that's true, So for me, attack wise, like I said, the Jackson improvement is huge, but obviously there's other talking points as well. You've seen Nkunku, who's been pretty good in his performances, but he's not really getting a run of form, and I think there were some rumors over the break about a possible transfer. Noni as well, I think we both have pointed out he's been very selfish. So in terms of attack, like what really stands out for you in the past? Where do you see room for improvement?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on about Nkunku, but I'm hoping that when we shift Enzo, if we do shift Enzo to playing alongside Caicedo, it kind of opens up a position for Nkunku or Felix now in the first team, you know? I'm not sure, how Mudryk is going to feel about that, but I don't think Mudryk's performances have justified us giving him a spot in the, let's say, the Premier League team compared to Felix or Nkunku. I think both of those guys have been much better in their performances in the Conference League. I think what's striking here is uh, Noni. Let me put it this way, right? These guys are all young, and what you want to see is improvements season on season. And I think what you've pointed out there is about Jackson is spot on. His decision making is improving because these guys are actually getting game time. They're getting experience. They're learning how to make the right decisions. We're very lucky that Sancho and Palmer, they've played enough already to have a sense of what the right thing to do is. Jackson definitely did not have that last season, but it seems he has that touchwood this season. Madueke for me is a concern because again, a lot of the time he's not got his head up. He just wants to take on his man and either shoot or you know even when he hits the byline, his head is not up. He's aimlessly crossing the ball, and you'll see a lot of times today, even in today's game, Felix and Palmer are standing in very good positions for early cutbacks, but Noni's none the wiser. Um, and I think in general, his selfishness has led to, kind of one of the uh, opportunities that should be created quite regularly in this system, which is cutbacks from the byline, right? Uh, his selfishness is not allowing us to actually score goals from that kind of position. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how you've kind of balanced that off. I know he does tend to get a goal here and there, but do you think that justifies how much time he spends on the ball?
No, I don't. I think the selfishness is something that's been irking me as well recently. And on top of that, there seems to be an attitude problem, right? Like versus Arsenal, he's come off and he's gone straight down the tunnel. So that really takes away from the team spirit, in my opinion, and I don't appreciate that. And yeah, I completely agree with you. There have been too many moments where he could have had those cutbacks, and he's just, even today, I think there was a moment where there was a pass on for Palmer. And granted, I'm a bit biased because I have Palmer in my FPL, but there was at least one opportunity where he could have cut it back and Palmer might have had a better chance, but he just forced the shot on defender and it goes out of play. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw Noni on the bench soon. Especially, I would have expected that if Pedro Neto was fit and now Sancho's coming back and you've got a lot of options on the left and on the right. I mean, Neto has shown he's capable playing there as well. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Neto starting on the right and another person playing on the left, and Noni then being relegated to the bench. I think I could see that happen for sure.
But let me ask you this then, right? You're basically saying you would take Neto over Madueke, right? Which side do you think Neto is actually best used on?
So I think he's naturally left-sided player, I believe. I think the way he plays, he's sort of. I think with Wolves, he even played as like a false nine at some games. So he's clearly able to play anywhere across that front line. And you called it out earlier, I think, versatility, right? We have a versatile set of players. So if you have someone who can play on that right wing and is effective, I mean, when he I forget which game it was, but he switched over to the right and he got an assist from there as well. So if memory serves me well. So if he's capable of doing that, see why not play him on the right? Yes, he may be naturally left-sided, but if he can play both, play him there, I'd take that over Noni because he does the same thing Noni does, which is sort of, he puts his head down, he's quick on the ball, he can take on a defender, get past them and get to the byline and cut back. So if that's something we're looking for, and Noni is cutting back on the left a lot and sort of eating into the space Palmer operates, then why not drop him? And you also then have that selfishness factor sort of dropping where you have a player who's willing to sort of look up and try and actually make a goal happen rather than go for glory himself.
Yeah, you see, I think you've basically highlighted my main concern with playing Neto or Madueke on the right, as long as Palmer is in that right half space. Because as long as Palmer is there, these left-footed wingers want to cut in also into a similar space. And Palmer running into the right half space channel, being left-footed, is not as effective as, let's say, an Enzo, right? So this is what I'm thinking now, that it might actually be better to have a right-footed winger, you know? And it comes back to the argument of, look, Gusto is a rapid right back who loves to bomb forward and makes very effective runs in behind. And James is also, his crossing ability is second to none. Obviously, the problem is, can he bomb up and down the right flank as we would require him to? But I just think when you look at trying to create chances and opportunities, but in different ways, right? Making sure your attack is balanced. On the right hand side, it's too left footed, you know? And they're trying to do very similar things. And I think it's overall nullifying each other. I think if Neto commits to just being more of an outside winger, it could work. But I wonder also if we look at Mudrik and try and reform him into a right-footed, a right winger, and try that out for a bit.
Yeah, yeah, I think we just have to see how it goes. We're Um, I think one thing we can agree on is we would like to see Noni dropped. So let's just see how that goes. But yeah, so that's the entire playing unit. What about Maresca and how he's been approaching games, his use of subs, tactics, of course, we save for the deeper dive into that. But overall, I think so. I'll give you my 2 cents. I think he's handled a potentially big squad quite well. This whole Team A and Team B, I think it works in terms of keeping players happy. Yes, you do have problems when there's a lack of chemistry, which might be something you can call out to say the Newcastle run and I mean the Newcastle game and the end of the Carabao Cup run, which is another point where I'm not sort of too happy with the way he sort of approached it. I think one of the justifications for having such a big squad, which is obviously what was briefed into the media, was obviously that Chelsea are expecting, a 70 80 game season with all the cups that we have, and getting knocked out in the Carabao Cup is obviously not ideal from that perspective. But what do you think of the way Maresca has approached this first portion of the season?
Yeah. So I think Maresca has shown a lot more adaptability than I expected. I was expecting an extremely possession based, so low tempo style of play based on his one season at Leicester. But actually, I think we've been a lot more direct than I expected. And it's weird because in whatever he's saying to journalists and into the media, he still gives the impression that he wants to control games, but there are definitely periods of basically every game we've played where we are not in control, even though we may be in the lead. Um, but I wonder if that's a maturity thing with the squad, and maybe they lack the nous when it comes to game management. But yeah, I think overall, there's a bit of a like a contradiction there because he's allowing us to play quite direct at times, even though he wants to maintain control of games and dominate games. And this is the reason why I'm also surprised at his staunch defense of Sanchez. But I mean, Sanchez goes direct quite often, and more often than not, it's always the wrong choice. But nevertheless, I think he's been good in that regard for the man management aspect because he's trying to make Sanchez feel like he's got his back. So that I can't fault him for. But yeah, the tactics side has been a surprise. I think one thing remains in question is, has he set us up correctly to nullify opposition's threats? Firstly, are we too open on the transition, and are we as effective as we can be in the counter press? But also, when we're dropping deeper, we're trying to press in a 4-4-2. I'm not sure that's the best way to get the team to defend positionally. But like you say, then I guess we'll have to see how things go. Those are the main concerns I would have about Maresca right now, is mostly on the defensive aspect.
Yes, you've asked a lot of great questions, and I think we're gonna dive into some of them on the tactics part as well. But given now that we are a third of the season through, right? SofaScore rates Chelsea's season as a 7.0. So so far we've basically played um 12 games in the league, and as things stand, we are third on 22 points. Arsenal yet to play, likely to win, and if things continue, will probably be behind us or have a similar goal difference and be third as well. So how would you rate our season so far, and how have we fared compared to what your expectations were at the start of the season?
I mean, look, it definitely we're way above my expectations. I didn't think he'd have us playing this coherently. And keep in mind, this entire podcast, I've been pointing out where there are a lot of gaps and areas for improvement. But this is still a level of coherence I was not expecting. So I think overall is definitely above expectations. I don't know. You always are a little bit more optimistic in your predictions. So I assume that you're less surprised about where we are, right?
Yeah, I think when I look at the opposition we've played and some of my predictions, yes, I think we should have been maybe we're a couple of points off the pace. We likely could have had at least one more win in place of a draw. Obviously, 9 points off Liverpool at the top, and Liverpool are really setting the pace. City have had a couple of surprising results. They've lost the last two, which is quite unlike them. So we're 4 points behind them, and obviously keeping pace with Arsenal. And then
But I do have to ask, right? You're putting us in the conversation with, Liverpool, right? At the start of the season, would you really have had those expectations to be this high up? Should we really, is it fair to put us in the discussion of we should be title challengers already?
no, definitely not. I don't think that I'm saying we should be title challengers. I'm happy we're in the discussion for the top four, and I think that's what my bare expectation was. Definitely not title challengers. You could argue that, see, again, like I said, it's been based on the fixtures we've had. I think based on our fixtures, yes, like I think we should have beat United. I think we definitely should have beat Palace when we played them. Those draws have been a little bit unnecessary at times over the course of the season, when I look at the start, I think top four was like the minimum expectation I had, and I think that was sort of justified looking at the squad we had and the promise of Maresca and everything. Do I think that we're a bit fortunate to be where we are? No, I think it's justified based on everything we've seen. Do I think we're going to end up the season in this position? I don't know. It could go any way. It's too early to say for sure that we're going to finish in the second or third spot, but I'll take it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I see your perspective. I think your expectations are a little bit high, but it's all subjective, right? If I'm going to put a number on it, I would probably say we're at a 5.5 or a 6. Again, I think we've highlighted in this pod a lot of areas to improve, and there's still more. I'm sure if we set aside the time for a tactics pod soon, we could go through where all the gaps are that we're seeing right now. And for that reason, I'd like to think we're at a 5.5, 6 on 10 because there's just a lot of room to improve. And having said that, the fact that we're in third slash fourth, it's great, right? Because you still have a huge chunk of the season for you to improve. The question is, are the improvements actually going to be made? Um, the signs are still a bit murky because on the one hand, we've seen Maresca. He came in with a reputation of, oh, I'm going to play this 3-2-5 in a certain way, and it's going to be his principles are quite rigid. But actually, then it's turned out that Chelsea is still playing some of that Pochettino counter-attacking football, with a little bit of more direct, high tempo play, mixed in with a little bit of control. But then on the flip side, there are times where, yes, we're making the same silly mistakes that you would expect of a team trying to play the ball out of the back when maybe direct would be better. So again, there are a lot of areas for improvement. It's just a question of whether these things are going to be made. I do think he needs to specifically work on the way we defend. Um, we're conceding way too many goals. So again, this will be a great point of review when we talk about this again in March, I guess. But yeah, I think that's kind of it for our review of the performances, let's say over the last month and a half. But I think now we wanted to go into some previews, right? So what games are we looking ahead to?
Yeah, so prediction time, right? My favorite time of an episode. So we're gonna kick things off with Heidenheim in the Conference League on the 28th of November. For me, again, I think every Conference League fixture is a win, so nothing more to be said there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say win, even though I think in our preview pod for the Conference League, I think I did say we would draw this one because I'm wondering when the complacency and the kind of tetchiness from the B team is gonna um, start kicking in, and I think that's gonna be this game. So yeah, I'll put us actually, I'll put us down for a draw against Heidenheim.
Fair. I think that complacency was probably the Newcastle game. And I think having had that result, they're not going to want to drop points in the Conference League. So we then have Villa on the 1st of December. Villa seem to be underperforming their last season's form. They're currently ninth place with 18 points. They've had two draws, two losses, and one win in their last five. I think based on where they are currently, this would probably be one that would be a tough one for us. And I'm going to say it's going to be a draw, but you never know with Emery. He could surprise us and we could even lose it. But it's a home fixture. I think we should get a draw. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a difference between what we want and what's actually gonna happen, right? So I'm putting us down for a draw. I think we'll kind of equalize last minute. I'm feeling a vibe here.
Okay, okay. And then Southampton on the 4th of December. Again, an away fixture. There seem to be a lot of away fixtures in the month of November going to December. So Southampton, 4th of December, they're currently bottom of the table, and I don't see them really doing much to sort of change that. So, should be an easy win for us and set us up quite well for the next fixture after that.
I think they just picked up their first win, if I'm not mistaken, a couple weeks ago.
They did. They
Yeah,
did.
but I no, I have to eventually say that Chelsea are going to win a game in the Premier League. So I think we should be going to win this. I think we will. So if we don't win, you know who to blame. Okay, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important as well because then your next fixture is the big derby, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I was just gonna say for that fixture, I mean, any point, like any amount of points is a good point. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Spurs away on the 8th of December.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very stupid way of saying it, but I'd be happy with a point. We need to grind out something here.
I don't know. I mean, I think just given the fact that it's Spurs, we should be beating them. I'm going to go with a going with a win because they've been very inconsistent. I mean, their last five has literally been loss, win, loss, win, loss. So I'm hoping they carry that inconsistency forward and it's a loss when it comes down to us because I think there's always a point to prove versus Spurs, and it's always these are the statement games, right? You go into a derby knowing you want to sort of win it and get the 3 points, and the players are fired up. So I think that should work in our favor.
Yeah, I'm still saying we'll probably draw this game, and I think we'll take a point unless they get unless they get sent off twice. If two players get sent off from Spurs, that would help, you know. But that doesn't happen every time we play them, unfortunately. And I think for the last game, Astana again. I'll put us down for a draw just to make it interesting.
Okay, you know my point on Conference League: win, nothing more to say. So Astana should be a win. Okay, so you're calling draw first, Tana. I'm calling win. So overall, as usual, I'm bringing the vibes with more wins than our Mr. Negative over here. But I think that concludes the predictions side of things. We'll be back before the Brentford fixture to deep dive into the tactics and assess the upcoming run. But yeah, Sharon, anything to add?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the tactics episodes because I think we've been alluding to it for a while. And yeah, I mean, I don't mind the nickname Mr. Negative. I think my wife calls me the Debbie Downer or the Vibe Killer. So Mr. Negative doesn't sound so bad.
Okay. There you go, ladies and gentlemen, some insight into the married life of one Sharon Kripalani.
Yep.
All right, then. On that note, this is the end of another episode of We Burn Blue. Follow us on Twitter at We Burn Blue Pod and give us a follow on Spotify or YouTube or even Apple Podcasts. I think we're on there as well, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leave us a review. Until next time, this is Prashant signing off.